Welcome to another episode of Trial Site News. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a potentially disturbing trend, where the federal government and pharmaceutical industry seem to have created an organic, evolving state-influenced cabal, something that might very well become a permanent fixture going forward. We're going to discuss what is going on here. And so, from Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and our episode is starting right now. So, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become far more clear just how extensive the involvement of the federal government is in biopharmaceutical research and development, manufacturing, and even the commercial value chain. But what if this isn't just a temporary condition caused by the pandemic, but rather a permanent order that's emerged over what is arguably the most critical of industries, along with energy and defense? It seems that there is an ever-increasing number of voices of critics calling the regulatory agencies captured, or so-called crony capitalism. This is just a few examples that are frustration-born responses to this emerging, possibly permanent healthcare government complex. So the question arises, has the federal government in the US, among its many agencies, essentially taken over biopharmaceutical research and development since the onset of COVID-19? Could this have been an accumulating trend before the pandemic? It certainly feels that both statements could be correct here. To put it into context, worldwide pharmaceutical research and development are estimated by Statista at $238 billion, while US figures are approximately $102 to $107 billion, or 43 to 44% of the worldwide total. Now, during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, according to various sources, approximately $48 billion of U.S. research and development, or about 47% of total R&D, is tied somehow into federal government contracts. And once the federal government reaches itself into an industry, rarely does it remove itself afterwards. Now, to help you get a better grasp on what this really means, let's look at the true extent of federal government involvement and intervention in the biopharmaceutical research sector. Part of the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response in Health and Human Services is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, which is responsible under HHS for the procurement and development of countermeasures, mostly targeting bioterrorism, including chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. Now, this would also include pandemic influenzas and emerging disease such as SARS-CoV-2. Established back in 2006 via the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act, the agency reports to ASPR. This office manages Project BioShield, which funds the research, development, and stockpiling of vaccines and treatments that government can use during public health emergencies, such as the case ongoing for a pandemic or chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear attack, for example. Now, there are over 250 companies, academic medical centers, and other institutes that are now under some kind of contract and or partnership with BARDA and ASPR, which means that the influence and power of federally directed life sciences economy continues to grow. And then you factor in as well the National Institute of Health's research and development spending, which reached $45 billion in 2022. And when you look at this, it becomes clear just how dominant federal agency entanglement has become in terms of influence, intellectual property rights, and in some cases, outright power. Recent trends in drug approvals in the United States reveal how, over time, smaller biotech have ever more numbers of approved new molecular entities or biological licenses due to NIH and other funding resources, as well as federal programs such as orphan designation, fast track, accelerated, and breakthrough review benefits. With this move away from blockbuster drug to niche, precision, and even personalized therapies, a whole new class of nimble biotech, such as cell and gene therapy ventures, depends heavily on venture capital and private equity, while also counting on a myriad of federal support funding mechanisms. It appears then that traditional pharmaceutical industry appears to have fallen by the wayside, with COVID-19 marking an acceleration of a deeply integrated federal government and industry alliance that the average entrepreneur fears might be sliding into fascistic type of structure. From this paradigm, the forced mandates, docile regulators, and all the other anomalies observed during COVID-19 begin to make sense. So then the question arises, is this a natural evolution or a planned move to compete with countries like China? Or could there be other motives here? Another view on this subject is that America is moving into the advanced stages of capitalistic society as the US and Europe increasingly depend on intertwined centralized government power to compete against a Chinese model that doesn't really have a concept of independent biopharmaceutical companies once they get to a certain size, and has declared the life sciences sector a matter of national security. According to the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation, the U.S. must take action against China's national security-related life sciences programs. These involve biopharmaceutical research and development. Published just last month by Peter Brooks and Dustin Carmack, the People's Republic of China, or the PRC, has one of the world's most advanced life sciences R&D enterprises. Beijing is clearly driven to become the world's biotechnology leader for a variety of reasons, including national security purposes. Beijing's national military-civilian fusion policy means that work in the life sciences for peaceful civilian ends could support the belligerent military, intelligence, and other national security applications and policies. The PRC's dual-use ambitions in the life sciences will have consequences for U.S. national interests going forward. Considering the PRC's prodigious geopolitical aspirations, unprecedented military buildup, and revisionist vision of global politics, Beijing's potential use of the life sciences, especially biotechnology, requires significant action from U.S. policymakers. So back to the U.S. and what critics would call the concerning industry-government cartel takeover. Well, according to Trial Site News contributor Sasha Latipova, a biomedical product entrepreneur and executive, she said, quote, "A legal framework has been set up to merely toss away all the standard laws, regulatory compliance norms, and more associated with traditional FDA-regulated medical product development and commercialization." With nearly 50% of U.S. pharmaceutical R&D spend involvement, and probably more when tracing back all of the NIH dealings, associated with various grants and financings, according to Sasha's research, 97 products have been developed under this tripartite of the federal government, biopharma industry, and supporting academic research. She goes on to make the case that once you introduce Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, or CMS-influenced sales, there's hardly anything in biopharma companies that is exclusively done by the private sector anymore. Over 160 million Americans depend on their access to medicines and healthcare coverage through federal government programs and Medicare and Medicaid to the VA and programs in the Department of Defense and HHS Title V. The feds, via one agency or another, have influence and increasing control, from research and development to production and commercialization. In this way, the U.S. is starting to resemble something very different from its historical roots as a private sector, entrepreneurial-driven society. And matters have only worsened under the public health emergency, especially when adding a contractual structure that avoids transparency and process friction, known as OTA, or Other Transaction Authority. As contributor at Trial Site News Stephen O'Connor wrote recently in his article, "Why is the COVID-19 Response So Militarized?", the pharma companies have benefited from a legal Iron Dome defense from zero liability under the PrEP Act to OTA defense contracts cloaked in secrecy that don't demand or require normal behavior. That is why so many things involving the FDA, for example, seem off lately. Which then brings us back to the Trial Site News contributor Sasha Latipova, who said that now the federal government-led cabal in one form or another represents the regulator, the financier or investor benefiting from the commercialization of these products on the market, and they also become a dominant buyer of these products via CMS. Which, of course, when you take a step back and look at this both here and now and the long view, meaning down the road, and you see the endless possibilities for corruption here, it is very concerning indeed. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. As always, thank you so much for joining me on the program today. From Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.